Hey there, welcome to Mike's Collection, episode 129. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is kind of some random odds and ends. I literally just shot a video for a wave of Marvel Legends. I do have a video about Masters of the Universe Origins that I hope to do very soon because I have a lot of figures that I want to cover in that video. But besides those ones, I do have another full wave of Marvel Legends that I'm going to want to talk about soon. But this video here, I'm going to try and focus on some of the odds and ends that I've picked up. I've got some Funko Pops, I've got a Transformer, some Star Wars Black Series, and I don't have enough of any one particular set to kind of do just a Black Series video right now or just a Transformers video. So this is going to be a bit of a catch-all. I'll show you as much as I can without making it go too long. So without any further ado, why don't we just jump into it. So let's get the Funko Pops out of the way first. So you see here I've got two new G.I. Joe Funko Pops, Scarlett and the Baroness. And I've actually kind of decided I am not going to buy these G.I. Joe Funko Pops anymore. I love G.I. Joe, but I kind of prefer Funko Pops for the kind of weird properties that you wouldn't necessarily buy as an action figure. So like, for example, I like the musicians, or maybe kind of a weird one-off movie. Like, I don't really need a line of action figures of Die Hard, but it's cool to have a Funko Pop of John McClane or something like that. But when it comes to things like Masters of the Universe and G.I. Joe and Transformers, like, I already have huge collections of G.I. Joe, Transformers, Masters of the Universe action figures, so it seems kind of silly to buy them all over again as Funko Pops. Like, when they put out the first wave of G.I. Joe Funko Pops, and it was like 5 characters, like Snake Eye, Storm Shadow, Destro, Cobra Commander, I bought them all because I thought that was going to be it. They kind of took the main characters, made some Funko Pops, and that was all they made for quite a while. But then, in like just the past year or so, they made Shipwreck, and they made Zartan. I got both of those. And then they made Beachhead, and then they made Leatherneck, and Dr. Mindbender, and I didn't buy any of those. I saw them, and I passed on them, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to keep buying these G.I. Joe Funko Pops. It's getting ridiculous. However, I forgot that I had pre-ordered these two, so my pre-orders came in, and I felt kind of bad. I didn't want to tell the store that I wasn't going to buy them, so I picked up these two, and, you know, I don't really mind, because these are two of the main characters, and they're quite nice. There's also another new Snake Eyes and another new Storm Shadow in their kind of different costumes. I'm not going to get those. I've also seen there's a new Red Ninja figure that came out around the same time as these. I didn't pick that one up either. So these very likely will be my last G.I. Joe Funko Pops. I might buy, a couple more in the future if they make some of my absolute favorite characters, but I am not going to be a completist. It's just, I have like over 300 Funko Pops already. I just, if they plan to make all the different G.I. Joe characters, that's going to mean I have to get like 100 Funko Pops of just G.I. Joe, and I just can't do that. So anyway, let's just quickly take a look at these guys outside of the box. So here is Scarlet and Baroness outside of the box. Now these Funko Pops are based off of, I don't know if I'd say it's the cartoon or the early action figures. I think it's supposed to be the action figures more or less, because the category that they put these things in, you might have seen on the box, says retro toys. So these are supposed to be based on the 80s toys. So, Baroness here has got her kind of familiar all black catsuit with the red Cobra logo on the front, her glasses. Scarlett's got her kind of classic outfit, which is kind of the weird, like, yellowish bathing suit over the kind of bluish bodysuit. She's got her crossbow. So yeah, they look a lot like the vintage toys. I could bring out the vintage action figures to compare them, but I don't really want to dig them out, and we're trying to move things along pretty quickly. What I do have handy is the Scarlet and Baroness from the G.I. Joe Classified line. So I think Baroness is still pretty consistent. She's wearing the black armor, looks a lot like what we see there on the Funko Pop. This Scarlet in the Classified line has been, her costume has been updated, and her hair and everything. So these two don't really match up quite so well. But this one is definitely more true to the vintage action figure than this one is. So yeah, overall I'm pretty happy with these. But yeah, like I said, I don't think I'm going to buy too many more. Now here's a couple of more Funko Pops. And this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. These are the kind of things that I prefer to buy as Funko Pops, because I probably would not buy them as action figures. So what I've got here is the director, John Waters. If you're not familiar with him, he is a very interesting character who makes a lot of weird, interesting movies. This is what he looks like. So yeah, I am a John Waters fan, and I'm also a fan of Fall Out Boy. So here is the lead singer, Patrick Stump. Now they also made Pete Wentz, the guitarist, and he's probably better known as the face of Fall Out Boy, even more so than Patrick Stump, the lead singer, which is a little odd. And I like Pete Wentz, but I opted not to buy that one. Partly because when I see this figure, I see Patrick Stump. That looks like him. And anybody that's a Fall Out Boy fan that knows what Patrick Stump looks like, I think if they saw this figure on my desk outside of the box, they would know who that was. This guy here, I don't think that figure looks like Pete Wentz. I'm sure he wore this outfit and wore his hair like that at one point, but I picture him more with his bangs kind of swept over his face, a little bit more emo style. That's kind of the more kind of iconic look for him, I think. So I don't know, maybe if they make a Pete Wentz in a different outfit, maybe I'll pick that up at some point. But for now, I just went with Patrick Stump. So there you go. Let's quickly take a look at these guys outside of the box. So here is Patrick and John outside of the box. So what do we got here? So he's got his guitar, he's got his sneakers on. And, there's nothing super recognizable about him. For him, I think it's really more the combination of the hair, the guitar, and the hat. You put those three things together, and you pretty clearly have Patrick Stump. Now, as for John Waters, some people might have mistaken this figure for Steve Buscemi or maybe even Vincent Price or something. So I think what they went with to really make sure that people would know who this is they put a pink flamingo in his hand. Now, it's not like John Waters usually walks around with a pink flamingo, but one of the movies he directed was called Pink Flamingos, so that's why they gave that to him. But otherwise, he's just kind of a creepy guy in a suit, and he looks pretty cool. Although he doesn't stand up so good. And the last Funko Pop I have here is this special edition Batman. Now this here, I don't know, well they say special edition, I don't know if he's exclusive to a particular store. I think maybe it's a Toys R Us exclusive here in Canada because we still have our Toys R Us locations. I don't know where you would buy it in the States or something, maybe Walgreens or something, I don't know. It doesn't really specify a specific store on here, usually they do. But anyway, I don't necessarily feel like I needed this figure, but I do kind of collect Batman Funko Pops. That is kind of one of the silly little things in my collection where I started off with 1, then 2, then 3, and 4, and now I have about 40 different Batman Funko Pops. Now the thing about those though is I prefer the old style of Funko Pops where it was all the same pose. They were all kind of in this little squatty position. So all my Batmen were the exact same mold, just painted differently. Now, some people might prefer the fact that they've kind of put a little bit more money into it, and now each Batman has its own unique sculpt, but I don't like that as much. So you can see here, his armor is pretty specific to one of the Batman movies. I'm not sure if this is from Batman Forever or Batman and Robin, but yeah, I prefer the old style when it was just a standard, mold for all the Batman figures. Anyway, this one here I've seen around for probably more than a year now. And because it was a special edition, it was priced at about $5 more than every other Funko. So around here in Canada, Funko Pops usually are about $14.99. This guy here was $19.99. And I just wasn't ready to pull the trigger for that amount. And actually, you know what? I'm just noticing on the front of the box, it says Batman 1989. So I guess this is supposed to be the Michael Keaton Batman in there. Anyway, I was in Toys R Us this past weekend, and they had this guy marked down to $9.99. So I thought, okay, well, that's reasonable. So I finally picked him up to add him to my Batman collection. Now let's quickly take a look at him outside of the packaging. Okay, so here is Batman outside of the package. So you can see there's some nice little detail in the sculpt and everything on the boots and the gloves. And basically what makes this one special is that he's supposed to look, I guess, like bronze, because he's got this kind of gold color. But then you can see he's got this kind of scratchy green wash, which kind of makes it look like he's got this patina on him. And it's pretty effective for a paint job, actually. I think it looks pretty realistic, actually, as like a bronze Batman with some patina. But yeah, it was pretty cool. And just as a comparison, I actually do have the standard edition of 1989 Batman. So here is the standard one. So you can see this is the exact same mold, just with the new paint job. And since I went to grab this one, I just thought I'd quickly grab a couple other Batman to show you what I was talking about with the old style Funko Pops. So this guy here, you see he's got this very simple body, not a lot of detail. He's just kind of short and squatty. So I have that same figure like dozens of times over in different colors. And that's kind of what I liked collecting. And then when they made the change to these kind of different style Batmans, I considered kind of stop collecting all the different Batmans, but at least thus far I've stuck with it. But I don't feel like kind of nearly as compelled to keep going with the new style. So the next little odds and ends thing that I want to take a look at is this little figure here of the Behemoth. So if you're not familiar with this guy, this is one of the Titans, or Kaiju if you prefer, that was introduced in the kind of second Godzilla movie, Godzilla King of the Monsters. So it's when the Monarch organization, they kind of unleash all the sleeping Titans, and you just see very brief little snippets of all these different monsters rising up out of the ground and stuff. So you see like this giant spider guy, and this kind of like turtley guy, and some more Mutos. And then you see this guy, and he looks like a big gorilla with big mammoth tusks. And they don't really give him a name. You only see him for a second. He's not included in any action sequences. But I thought he was super cool, and I think a lot of other people did too. And you kind of learned a little bit more about him just from some of the like bonus materials on the DVD, and maybe there was like some tie-in comic books, and you kind of learned, okay, so this guy's Behemoth. He is, kind of a benevolent Titan, kind of like Godzilla. Like, he doesn't seem to mean any harm to mankind. And I just think he's really cool. Like, you don't get too many of these, like, mammal Titans. Like, other than King Kong, most of them are kind of reptilian and, like, alien, lizardy kind of guys. So I really liked the Behemoth from the first time I saw him in King of the Monsters. And I was really hoping maybe we get to see more of him in the sequel, which was Godzilla vs. Kong. Unfortunately, none of the Titans other than Godzilla and Kong really appeared in that movie, but there were some prequel comic books that kind of established that Godzilla and Kong had kind of battled all the other Titans to establish their dominance, and it was down to just Godzilla and Kong, who were the last two that had to fight, and that's where that movie picked up. But in the comic books, there actually was a battle featuring the Behemoth, which was kind of cool. So anyway, as I described him, he's basically a gorilla with tusks, and I think that's there's not a whole lot more you can say about him. The thing that kind of sucks about this figure is, so I was in Toys R Us last weekend, and I saw this guy. He's in just a little tiny box. He was $4.99, so you can't beat that price, I guess. And he was there with a bunch of other creatures that I don't have action figures of, such as the War Bat, and some of the other, like a skull crawler, and some of the other things from the recent Monsterverse movies. But Behemoth was the only guy that really interested me, and I wondered, even though he's only $5, should I really waste my money on this guy, because he's not really to scale with anything else in my collection. Like, I have a whole bunch of Godzilla figures. Most of them are in the 6-inch scale from NECA. But, like, for example, if I put my Behemoth down here and bring in one of my 6-inch NECA Godzillas, that is really not much of a fight. And then most of my other Godzilla figures are even larger. So, yeah, I really don't know where to put this Behemoth on my shelf. He doesn't really look very good displayed with my other Titans. And I kind of hope that eventually, now that Super 7 has the Godzilla license, and they said that they plan to make multiple kaiju, not just multiple versions of Godzilla, I'm hoping that we get a nice new kind of 6-inch version of Behemoth. And if we do, then this is the kind of thing I can just kind of throw in a box, and it's a neat little novelty. But for now, it's the only version of the Behemoth that's available, and so I decided to add him to my collection, and I think he's cool, even though he's very, very small. So the next thing I want to show you is a Transformer from the War for Cybertron series. Now, the War for Cybertron toys have been a trilogy. It started off with Siege, and then Earthrise, and then Kingdom. I'm not really sure where this guy fits in. He's either I think Siege or Earthrise. But this is Thrust, and he is one of the Decepticon Seekers that turn into jets. Starscream is the most famous of the Seekers, and he's kind of the leader of the group. And this particular Thrust figure was an exclusive, I think, to Target. It could have been Walgreens, but regardless, whether it was Target or Walgreens, those are stores that I don't have in my area. Like I'm in the East Coast of Canada, and we don't have any Targets or any Walgreens, anywhere even remotely close to me. I'd have to drive 10 hours to maybe find one. Anyway, so I have missed out on a fair amount of figures that are exclusive to those stores. But and it sucks when I miss a figure that I kind of want. But Thrust was a figure that I really needed. Thrust is one of my all-time favorite Transformers. And it's kind of hard to really explain why. I always thought the Seekers were cool. They seemed like some of the most vicious members of the Decepticon team. And Starscream, don't get me wrong, I like Starscream, but he is kind of a whiny dick. So some of the other guys that followed him, they maybe didn't speak much in the cartoon, but they just seemed a little more badass than their leader, Starscream, because they weren't always whining and bitching and stuff. So with Thrust, I don't specifically remember him doing anything in the cartoon. I know he was in there, but he was often just, flying in the background behind the other guys. I don't remember what his voice sounded like in the cartoon. He would have been featured in the comic books that I collected as a kid, but again, I don't remember any specific scene that he did anything memorable. He's probably more or less a background character. The reason he's one of my favorites is because he is the only one of the 6 Seekers that I owned as a kid. Me and my brother, Doug, we collected toys together. So, I kind of considered our collections were kind of joined, even though we never really played with each other's toys. We just kind of played together. But not one of us owned Starscream or Thundercracker or Skywarp, Ramjet, or what's the other guy? Dirge. So we never had any of those guys. Between the two of us, Thrust was the only Decepticon Seeker that we had. And so I guess that's what elevated him in my collection. Since in the comic books and the cartoons, the Seekers were the ones that Megatron sent to do all of his dirty work. They were kind of the Decepticon enforcers. Since I didn't have any of the other 5 guys, that kind of nominated Thrust to be kind of my resident badass of my toys. So whenever I played with my Transformers as a kid, Thrust kind of really got elevated from his status in the cartoons and the comic books, and I just really loved him. So I got rid of most of my Transformer toys when I was probably in my tweens, and I never really wanted to. I've always liked toys. I never really got out of toys, and I held on to my, my old G.I. Joes, and I held on to my old Battle Beasts, but I did have a lot of toys when I was a kid, and when I was trying to, grow up in my tweens, I think my mother kind of convinced me that it was time to get rid of some of my stuff, and Transformers are one of those things that were on the chopping block, partly because even though I love the Transformers, the characters, and the cartoons, the comic books, the toys often disappointed me because they didn't really look and move like the characters in the cartoon. So I got rid of most of my Transformers. And I shudder to think what I sold them for. I put them out at a yard sale, and I probably sold them for $3 or $4. We're talking the original Constructicons, the original Dinobots, the original Insecticons, all kinds of really cool Transformers. So yeah, I wish I had those things now. But Thrust is one of I kept I think 3 of my Transformers. I think it was Gears, Windcharger, and Thrust. So here is my vintage Thrust. So he's cool, but I think you can see what I mean in that they didn't quite live up to what they were supposed to look like. Like Thrust in the cartoons and comic books looked kind of like this. So this is kind of a sad representation of him. And so just to give you an idea, so let's look at his face there. He's got the right sculpt for the face, but the nose cone, it looks really kind of stupid. It doesn't really look like it's part of his head the way it does on this guy here. That fits a nice snug helmet. This here looks like I don't know, he's some weird airplane pope or something. It just, I don't like it. The arms, he actually does have hands, but they're separate pieces that you have to attach on there. But you see no elbows or anything. The legs, there's no movement in the legs. He can't kick, he can't do the splits, he can't bend at the knees. He's very, very stiff. So yeah, he's a cool looking toy. Not only, was he the only one I had, but I think, and I don't necessarily know why he's the only one I had, but I think if I had to choose one Seeker, I think I would have chosen him just for the color scheme. I think Thrust is the coolest looking of all the Seekers in the kind of the maroon and black colors. So anyway, there you go. I love Thrust. He's the only toy I kept, or one of a few. And when I started getting back into Transformers in like the early to mid 2000s, I think it was around 2005 when Hasbro started making what they were calling Transformers Classics. The first figure I got was Bumblebee from that line. And that kind of started me on the road of collecting Transformers again, thinking like, okay, cool, they're making Transformers, but they're making them more posable. They look more like they did in the cartoons and comic books. So I really liked that Transformers Classics line. And I got myself a Thrust from that line here. And I think this figure is pretty solid and still holds up really nicely today. Like, all my complaints about this figure, this guy fixes them. Like, his helmet, it fits much more believably. He's got detail in his face, like his eyes are painted. He's actually got a couple different colors there in the face. As for his arms, like, look at how much better those are. He's got a much better range of movement there. He can bend at the elbow. He can even turn at the wrist a little bit. His legs, he can kick. He can do the splits. He can bend at the knee, I believe. Yeah, a little bit. Bend at the knee. So yeah, really cool. Huge improvement. Looks way better. Really, really like this figure. And so I got this guy. I'm not sure exactly what year he came out. It might have been a couple of years after Bumblebee. So let's say 2007, 2008. This has been the Thrust that's been the default Thrust in my collection ever since. Which is fine. Except for the fact that I also had all the other matching Seekers basically in this format. So I had Thundercracker, I had Starscream, all in this style. They were all the same height. They all looked relatively the same. But then when this War for Cybertron line came out, I started replacing all of those Seekers. So I got new versions of Starscream, new versions of Thundercracker, of Skywarp, and they're quite a bit bigger. So all of a sudden Thrust, as I would replace the Seekers and take the old ones out of my collection and replace them with the new ones, he started looking kind of rinky-dinky and a little small next to all of his Seeker pals. And years have gone by now since the first set of the trilogy here. Like, I've had the Starscream and the Thundercracker for like 2 years, I guess. And I was really hoping they would do Thrust, and I didn't know what the holdup was. Anyway, when they finally announced that they were doing them, but they said he was going to be exclusive to one of the stores that I don't have in my area, that was a huge bummer. I had to cut away there for a second because I had a housefly here buzzing around my shot, which was kind of driving me a little crazy. Anyway, that gave me an opportunity to go grab my Starscream just to show you what I was talking about. So here's my Classics Thrust. Like I said, I had a Starscream that was the same mold, essentially, so they were all the same size. But then when the Siege Starscream came out, this was the first Starscream that came along in many years that I thought was good enough to buy and replace my Classics version. And, see, he kind of towers over Thrust. Thrust looks kind of small by comparison. And then they released this mold over and over and over again. I think I have this exact figure, I think 8 or 9 times now in different colors. So my Seeker army has grown, and they're much larger. And then poor little Thrust here, he's all by himself. And you can see there's a little bit of a difference. On the old toys, the vintage toy, some of the Seekers had cones on their head, and some of them had just these kind of little lines on the side of their head. And as a toy, they were all the exact same jet. So for the cone head guys, you just kept the nose cone up like this. But for Starscream, you just turn the nose cone back, and there you go. That's how you had that look. So that was really quick and simple. You could use the exact same toy for all 6 Seekers. But here, it doesn't work quite the same. He doesn't have the nose cone on the back that you can fold. So Hasbro couldn't just repaint this figure into Thrust without tweaking it. So I guess that's why they just kept repainting this mold and giving us new Seekers that we never had before, like Red Wing and Hot Link and stuff, rather than giving us some of these classic guys like Thrust. Anyway, it took a long time, but eventually they finally did give us an update of the Conehead mold. And the first one I was able to get was actually a brand new character that I was not familiar with beforehand. This is Sandstorm. So you can see here he's bigger than the classic version. He's more in line with the War for Cybertron Starscream. And so I've had these guys now for a little while. And once I got my hands on him, I knew it was only a matter of time before I got Thrust, Dirge, and Skywarp. Now, unfortunately, they made all three of those guys exclusives, and they're very hard to get. To this day, I still do not have Dirge and not Skywarp. It's Ramjet is the other one. So I don't have Ramjet, I don't have Dirge, and it didn't look like I was going to get Thrust. I want them all, but like I said, Thrust is one of my all-time favorites, so I had to get him. I was checking online for him all the time. I eventually found one online for sale at a Toys R Us out of province, but I had my sister who lived near that store to go pick him up for me, and she's had this thing now for me for a couple of months. Let me get him out of here. And so yeah, this past weekend I was finally able to get him from my sister, and here we go. So finally I have Thrust, which, as you can see, it is just a repaint of Sandstorm, or Sandstorm that repainted him. I don't know which one technically came out first, but I've had this guy for a while now. And yeah, it's a pretty successful figure. I've rambled on about this guy enough, but just I love the face sculpt on this guy. I think he looks great. Lots of detail in the mold. I love, even though that purple on his knee pads looks kind of out of place, it is true to the 80s cartoon, so I like that they did that on there. You know, there's been times when I was tempted to buy the Masterpiece Thrust figure because it looked cool, but it's quite expensive and still not perfect. Like, I'd watched reviews of him in trying to convince myself whether I should buy him or not, and people had pointed out flaws, and I was like, you know what, if I'm going to spend that much money on a Thrust, I really want it to be perfect. So I'm going to hold out hope that they make a more reasonably priced one at retail. It took a long time, considering I've been collecting Transformers as an adult now since 2005. And here we are in 2021. I finally have Thrust. I think he looks great. He moves great. Like, so he's got the knees, the feet. He's got rocker joints at the ankle, so you can pose him with doing the splits, and he still stands good because you can kind of twist his feet so that they're still flat. You know, his arms, he's got good movement on the arms, bends at the elbow, spins around there like that. His head, he can turn around, you know, he can look in different directions. Looks really cool. I love this figure. I love this character. I'm super stoked to finally get him. One minor gripe, I will say, and I don't really care that much, but like on the vintage Thrust, let me get him back out here. So that nose cone, you see he's got the black nose cone. He's always had that. And when you turn him into a jet, how you do that is you flip this thing through his chest like so. And then you put the thing on there. And so there you see, that's the front of the jet taking shape. So the nose cone on the jet is actually the nose cone that you see on his head in robot mode. With this one here, it's actually a bit of a cheat. This cone is not actually the cone used in the jet mode. You can see that very clearly back here. You've got the whole front of the jet. Now, I never transform my Transformers. You can see what this guy looks like in jet mode from the packaging that I showed you earlier. He looks like a pretty cool jet. Oh, there's that fly. He's back again. I got like the Mike Pence of Transformers here. Anyway, it seems stupid to me that they put the black nose cone on his head like he's supposed to have. Get out of here, you. But this cone on the jet isn't black. So if I were to transform this into a jet mode, he would have a solid red nose. So just that inconsistency seems a little dumb. I don't know why they wouldn't have given it a black nose cone like it has always had. But that's an extremely minor gripe because I will never transform him into a jet, so I really don't care that much. Anyway, if there's Thrust, I think he's awesome. Okay, so I just realized I'm at the half-hour point. I do have enough odds and ends laying around here that I could probably talk for another half hour. But I think it probably makes sense to just stop right here, and I'll be back with maybe another half-hour episode later in the week to cover the rest of my odds and ends. So, yeah, we'll do that. So I'm going to cut away to my pre-recorded sign-off,
and I'll see you guys later.
So I hope you enjoyed this kind of review of random action figures that I've gotten over the past month or so. So yeah, if you did enjoy the video, please make sure that you hit like, hit subscribe, and leave me comments below. I will always answer. I'm happy to hear from you guys. And I'll be back soon with another video. So thanks for watching. Ciao.